May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Have you noticed how much of our advertising appeals to our own sense of inadequacy, and in order to get us to part from our money? Look at our appeals, the appeals of our charities, and our sense of and the sense of guilt that comes from them, or our sense of awkwardness from those who are trying to promote us with a particular kind of clothing or cosmetic or hair treatment. Look at the holidays that are promoted. One advertiser tells you you can explore the world in comfort. You don't even have to exert yourself, and yet you can go everywhere. You can then become the sparkle of every gathering, every party, every lunch party, dinner party, tea party, coffee party, beetle drive, whisk drive, and any of the other kind of drive you care to think of. You'll positively glow in the glory of that wonderful holiday and the tales of much daring do with which you can regale your other guests. You'll be the sparkle of the town. Buy this car and save the planet. And it's your bad luck if you happen to live in a flat. You've seen all this, haven't you? And so it goes on and on. And the Old Testament lesson definitely appeals to the consciences of the house of Israel, where everybody was kin to one another. And so everybody, it might have been a distant, but they were still kinsfolk, they were still in a relationship with one another. That was the whole point of being children of Abraham, after all. And so Isaiah writes very clearly about social relationships. Feed, clothe, and shelter those of your own kin who are in need. And you cannot serve God well when you are busy abusing your workers or your trading partners, never mind your kinsfolk. And you don't have to bias your judges. All you have to do is to administer justice fairly. That shouldn't be too big of an ask. All you have to do is to administer justice fairly and properly and without favoritism, especially when dealing with the wealthy and the prominent and the well-paid and the well-connected. And so if your weeks are full of abuse and of exploitation, then you really cannot expect to come before God to worship Him and serve Him faithfully on the Sabbath week by week. That's not the way it works. For God is neither blind nor deaf, and He's definitely not stupid. But then in the gospel, there is yet another way of looking at it. Well, Jesus speaking to His immediate disciples, who had already gathered around Him, others would come, and also to the other people who had already come to Him out of the towns and villages round about. And they were, having already heard the Beatitudes, the blessings of those whom the world despises, He then makes some startling statements. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And this is before He's gone into any detail about proper living in morality or in social relationships. But you are now. It's a statement. It's not a question, and it's not an invitation. It's not, would you like to become? Or don't you think it would be a good idea if you did? Or maybe if you're really, really good and you try really, really, really hard, you will become this. None of that is there. It's all a very clear and a very direct, you are right now. And you may not feel like it, and you may look at one another and say, oh, well, they don't look like it either. But in the sight of God, there is a different agenda. And He's not even discussing their personal issues and difficulties and challenges, the things in their lives that have gone absolutely upside down, There are rather cruder terms, but I think in the house of God I'll leave them in your imagination. But there are tensions at home and in the village, arguments with wife or husband, children being difficult and parents being worse. Never mind, and don't even mention the cousins. This is all very true to life. Every sort of personal issue was there, needing to be resolved. And yet, Jesus comes to them and says with utter confidence, "You are the salt of the earth, the light of the world." Now, this is what he saw in them. He saw not just the present, but the future. Not what they were now, but what they might yet become. Not how they were filled with their own needs, but how in due course they would be filled with the glory of God. And there'd be a new gender, a new wonder, a new beauty, a new glory, as self-diminished and God increased. And others, and these are the people who are already motivated to go out to hear him. Others might have had a football match to watch, or maybe a car to wash, or maybe reports or letters to write. Again, I'm kind of stretching the time frames a wee bit. Well, you get the general idea anyway. They might not have been all that bothered, frankly, about Jesus anyway, and they had other things to do and people to see meanwhile. And to that extent, those before him were self-selected. But here they were, watching, listening, thinking, pondering, praying, and yes, sorrowing for their own shortcomings, catching the words the way he expressed them. And looking at them, Jesus saw that potential. He'd already chosen some disciples, and others would come forward in due course. But these were people already there, gathered before him, coming out, having moved themselves, having set aside other things they might have done to come and hear him. Despite all the hesitation and the issues and the difficulties of life, they still wanted to hear him. And he would later pray in the high priestly prayer given us by John. He would say, "I pray for those that you have given me, for they are yours." These are the people with whom God has an agenda. And if it only took a few hours of listening on a hilltop sermon, then life would be very simple. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite that way. But there was still the starting point, and there's not a conclusion. There would be more to come, much, much more. And so St. Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, would reduce it to its absolute simplest. The message of how to live a godly life and a holy life would be the fruit of the life and the ministry of Jesus. All of it, climaxing in his crucifixion on the cross and his resurrection from the dead. Take away the cross and the resurrection, and you get an awful lot of beautiful teaching founded on a lot of wishful thinking and good intentions, but that is it. It is powerless. But include the cross, include and sin and death themselves are defeated and stripped of their power. They no longer have that power to cripple all of human life and to fill us with guilt and resentment and inadequacy and make us easy meat for anyone who has a particular product or a particular political doctrine to ply. But in Jesus, the fear of death is neutralized, and the power of sin is no longer founded on guilt. It is met by the acknowledgement of personal sin and the power of his forgiveness. Now the gospel is for everyone. All you have to do is to be human in order to qualify. And I think most of us come into that category. If there are any pets in here, you're very blessed, but it's a different agenda for you. The gospel is for everyone. Definitely they are for those who follow Jesus, but also those who may yet come to know him. For that, they need to see some lights. Like a city set on a hill, the fellowship of believers who trust in him and find their identity in him above and before all other considerations. Individuals whose lives have a flavor of something richer and more distinct. Salt, uncompromised by sand or other contaminants. People like you, lights, gathered like a candelabra, beautiful, glorious, and yes, not afraid to name their sins before the Lord. Amen.